Back in the 80s, before September 11 when the US military's focus shifted completely to the Middle East, aircraft carriers used to spend entire deployments in the Mediterranean Sea playing cat and mouse with the Soviet Navy, doing bilateral exercises with NATO allies, and pulling great liberty in ports like Cannes and Malta. During that time there was also a persistent pain in the ass Libyan dictator named Moammar Gadhafi. A few decades before Gaddafi met his untimely demise at the hands of rebels, he made a sport out of provoking the US Navy's 6th Fleet assets, primarily by claiming that the entire Gulf of Sidra was territorial Libyan water. He called the line along the northernmost part of the Gulf the Line of Death and warned that any American ships or airplanes that crossed it would be met with the full force of the Libyan military. Fighters from the aircraft carrier's air wing would routinely fly inside the Line of Death as part of the American Navy's Freedom of Navigation operations, aka F-14 ops. Designed to prove a commitment to the conventions of international admiralty law that said that the Gulf of Sidra was, in fact, a gulf, so therefore the only territorial waters that Libya could claim were those that extended 12 miles off the coastline. F-14 ops were generally boring in that the Libyan military didn't respond at all in spite of Gaddafi's bluster. Fighters would spend hours on combat air patrol stations drilling holes in the sky without a single vector from the controllers in the early warning aircraft whose radar screens remained blip-free. But that wasn't the case on January 4, 1989, when two F-14A Tomcats assigned to the swordsman of VF-32 got the call to investigate two contacts that had launched out of Tobruk, a dream scenario for Cold War-era aviators, but one that also had a few dubious moments, particularly for the pilot and his radar intercept officer, Rio, in the lead aircraft. The rules of engagement at that time were more lenient than previous 6th Fleet rules had been in that a Libyan aircraft didn't have to fire at an American to be declared hostile, but simply if it had turned toward an American aircraft that attempted to turn away 3 times. Analysis of the lead Tomcat's mission recorder reveals the following, with video timestamp in parenthesis. 011, the lead Rio transmits bogies have jinked back at me for the 5th time. Contacts on the F-14's AWG-9 radar system had a tendency to windshield wiper when the aircraft maneuvered, showing erroneous heading changes, but at this point the Rio believes the ROE has been met to declare the Libyans hostile. 019, lead Rio transmits inside of 20 miles, master arm on, telling the pilot to flip the switch in the front cockpit. The pilot responds with good light, which means the missiles are now ready to fire. 041, after an exchange between the lead Rio and the wing pilot regarding the bogey's Angels altitude, the lead pilot is less convinced than his Rio that the ROE has been met. He transmits Alpha Bravo from 207, an attempt to speak to the admiral on the carrier to get a ruling, but gets no response. Lead Rio transmits 13 miles. Fox 1, as he pushes the launch button in the rear cockpit and fires an AIM-7M Sparrow missile. His pilot responds by muttering Jesus over the intercom, an indication that he's not entirely comfortable with his backseater's zeal. Lead Rio's excitement gets the best of him, and he shoots a second Sparrow before the first one has time to make it to the target, which prevents either missile from guiding accurately. Lead Rio calls 6 miles as the wing pilot transmits Tally 2, and then says turning into me. The crews now know for sure that they're engaged with the MiG-23 floggers. Lead pilot says okay, he's got a missile off over the intercom, referring to the fact his wingman just shot a Sparrow, a forward quarter shot from about 5 miles away. Lead pilot transmits, good hit on one, as the wingman Sparrow hits one of the MiGs. One senior member of the Top Gun staff characterized the shootdown as punching kids coming off the short bus. It's also telltale that Fighter Pilot of the Year honors that year did not go to the lead pilot, who also happened to be the squadron's commanding officer, but instead went to the wingman, who was only a first-tour lieutenant at the time.
Eagle Control, Alert 1. Splash 2. Repeat.